Hi, welcome to this new series where we'll be searching for the ideal MIDI brain for your synth studio. We'll be looking at some of today's most popular music making boxes with MIDI capability beyond the spec sheet from a real everyday user's point of view. In this video, I'll be reviewing the Octatrack's capability of satisfying your MIDI needs. For quite a while now, the Octatrack has been regarded as both the pinnacle of sound mangling technology and as one of the devices with the steepest learning curves in the music making landscape. A few years ago, I would have fully agreed with that perceived difficulty in mastering the Octatrack. Full of secondary functions requiring many button combos, cryptic abbreviations, and a user manual that was written by bots, getting the Octatrack to behave was no easy task at all. And when it came to using it as a controller for all my other synths, it was never really my first choice unless I had some considerable time on my hands to put the work in. Thankfully, things have changed quite a bit since the last update though. Electron took what they learned from designing more streamlined and user-friendlier experiences with the Digitakt and the Digital and found a way to incorporate that into its flagship sample mangler. Also, at long last, a hero rose among the ranks and took on the challenge of making a manual that's actually for human beings, and I want to give a shout out to the amazing Synth Dog. If you don't know him, he makes some of the best handbooks / manuals for synths and samplers, and he recently released his Octatrack notebook, which now gives you a cohesive, well-explained, and digestible way of understanding and learning the Octatrack. I'm not affiliated with him in any way, and he probably doesn't even know that I bought his book, but I fully recommend checking it out. So with that out of the way, is the Octatrack the MIDI brains that you're looking for? Let's take a look at what it offers. Available MIDI tracks and polyphony. The Octatrack is an 8-track audio sampler that can also act as a mixer, looper, and effects pedal. But aside from its 8 audio tracks, it can also sequence 8 dedicated MIDI tracks independently from its audio, meaning that you don't lose any audio tracks when using MIDI. 8 MIDI tracks is still pretty slim though, considering that some of the competition, like the Deluge and the MPC, pretty much have as many MIDI tracks as you would want. Also, each MIDI track is limited to 4 voice polyphony, so not exactly a powerhouse in this category. Connectivity. The Octatrack features full 5-pin MIDI in, out, and through. Call me old school, but I really love that you don't need any breakout cables, and the fact that you get a through port just makes it feel like a complete and serious grown-up music device. Something to note, however, is that it does not have any CV connectivity, and it is not overbridge compatible like its newer Digitakt and Digitone siblings. Considering the popularity of Eurorack nowadays, that might be a deal breaker for some. The Octatrack may be starting to show its age a bit here with lack of more USB integration and overbridge compatibility. But for my DAWless setup, it brings everything I need to the table, as long as that table doesn't have any CV needs for Eurorack in it. Learning curve. No Octatrack video would be complete without at least mentioning the learning curve. Though by no means impossible, it does require more dedicated and concentrated study than other machines, and I blame it mostly on Electron's own particular vocabulary and abbreviation system. Once you break through that initial hump though, you'll find that it is very logical and well thought out. I also think that it really depends greatly on how you approach learning it, with the Electron manual being the absolute worst way and the Synth Dog manual making it a much smoother ride. It is a complex machine and it does require patience and effort to master, so don't expect to just jump right in and get everything down on the first try. The best tip I can give first-time owners is break it up into little pieces and focus on just one thing. Don't take it all in at once, because that might get overwhelming. It is a bit hard, but it's completely doable. Initial setup. As with any multiple synth rig, time must be spent setting things up so that everything that you want to go bleep goes bleep when you want it to. In the Octatrack, you have a myriad of parameters and settings to choose from, so I highly recommend getting into the habit of making and using project templates instead of setting things up from scratch every time. Oddly enough though, I wouldn't recommend beginner users to use templates at first, and would suggest that they actually go through the motions each time they start something new, at least just the first few times, as it will help them get familiar with the machine's layout, as well as tune in that necessary muscle memory early on. When setting up MIDI for the first time, you want to turn the MIDI on, which makes the MIDI button turn yellow. You'll notice that the tracks have an X attached to them, and that means that they aren't active or assigned to a channel yet. By going into the secondary menu of the source button, you can assign MIDI channel, program bank, and subbank. Beware that you need to press yes for any of these changes to actually take effect. Each track can control up to 10 control changes, or CCs, as well as the automatically assigned standard pitch bending and aftertouch controls. You can find these parameters in the secondary menu of the Effects 1 and 2 buttons. To activate them, you'll need to press Function plus the knob you want to activate in the submenu. As for programming them, it's very simple as long as the external synth can transmit MIDI. After activating the CC with function and pressing the knob in the main page, in the secondary page, you can do this again and it will activate MIDI Learn. You just twist the knob you want to control on your synth and voila! What's cool is that now the Octatrack controls the synth CC, but you can also control the Octatrack CC with the synth knob. Something important to note is this little dot in the upper right and left corner of the screen. That dot lights up on the left when MIDI is coming in, as well as on the right when MIDI is going out, which is a useful thing to know if you're having trouble setting things up and don't really know if the MIDI signal is being received or sent out. What I normally do when I'm setting things up is I set the synth to send MIDI into the Octatrack so I can assign the CCs. After I'm done, I then switch out the cables so now the Octatrack is sending MIDI to the external synth. That way, I'm all set up to jam and make music fast. Once you know where everything is, it's really straightforward and quick. Also, you can easily set up templates and get going much faster that way. Finally, the sequencer. Now this is where the Octatrack pulls way ahead of the competition. It's well known that the Electron sequencer is like one of the biggest draws to owning an Electron device, and being able to use its craziness on your external synths is one of the greater joys of the DAWless lifestyle. By the way, if you're enjoying this content, I would really appreciate it if you could take a second and click that like button, because it helps this information reach more people, and honestly, everyone should know about the Octatrack. Also, if you want to support the channel, consider buying your gear using my affiliate links down below, or head over to my Patreon page, where you can help this channel keep on growing and join the awesome community we have going on the Discord. Hope to see you there. As for inputting notes into each step, you can use either an external keyboard, the Octatrack's own trig buttons, or just assign the notes with the rotary knobs. You can sequence each step individually or live record, either quantized or unquantized. As mentioned before, each step can have up to 4 notes, giving you 4-note polyphony per track. What I find very interesting is that these 3 other notes are not fixed, so to speak. They are assigned relative to the root note. So instead of inputting a C, an E, and a G, for example, you'll input C plus 4 plus 7, referring to semitones with regards to that root note. When live recording, the sequencer will record note length, velocity, and aftertouch, giving you a very good range of expressiveness and humanization on your sequence. As expected, you get the usual Electron bag of tricks at your disposal, such as parameter locking and probability. The sheer scope and possibility and creativity that this opens up is staggering, and once it clicks, there's just no limits to how much juice you can squeeze out of it. There is one major disappointment here though, and that is that you can't assign scenes or use the fader when in MIDI mode. This is a huge bummer, since the scenes and the fader are what, to me at least, makes the Octatrack truly unique and indispensable in my setup. The morphing of parameters with that extremely precise and responsive fader is what makes the Octatrack come alive, so not having that option in MIDI mode feels like a colossal loss. It's not the end of the world though, as the Octatrack has a few more tricks in its MIDI magician's hat. The first is the LFO, or rather, it's 3 LFOs per track, with the ability of designing your own LFO. Flexible, powerful, and most importantly, assignable and designable, the Octatrack absolutely kills it in this department. It almost makes up for the missing fader. Safe to say, you can add immense variety to your tracks with assigning just a few LFOs here and there. And last, but definitely not least, there is the Octatrack's arpeggiator. If I'm being honest, calling it an arpeggiator feels like a gross understatement, bordering on disrespect. But hey, that's what Electron called it, so who am I to say any different? Thing is, the arpeggiator not only arpeggiates, it can have different lengths. You can offset and mute notes in the arpeggiation sequence, and it allows you to transpose your sequence, as well as set legato on and off, and set your track on a fixed scale. Nothing fancy, just major and minor scales, but honestly, that's more than enough for my humble purposes. Apart from being extremely customizable, the arpeggiator can be set to normal modes like up, down, random, and shuffle. I cannot overstate how much I love the Electron sequencer and the weird and wonderful musical places it has taken me over my years that I've had it. I think that the sequencer alone will more than make up for the hours you'll probably spend reading manuals and watching tutorials until you understand everything you need to know. The Octatrack may have gotten a bad rap for being hard to master, but I really feel that, especially after its latest update, along with the vast amounts of information and tutorials available right here on YouTube, the code has finally been cracked, and the Octatrack ain't heavy no more. I feel that the Electron sequencer, the arpeggiator, and the LFOs more than make up for its shortcomings. It is truly a MIDI powerhouse, and it makes musical explorations feel fun and limitless. If I could falter for something, it would be that forgotten fader and the scene switching capability, as well as the 4-voice MIDI polyphony limit. However, I feel that it is important to note that the Octatrack is a 10-year-old machine, but it is still easily in the top tier of music making devices of our time. It has repeatedly taken me where no other machine can go and back, and looking back, it's been responsible for some of the best and most interesting music I've ever come up with. If you want to find out more about what made the Octatrack a more user-friendly device in the latest firmware update, make sure to check out this video next. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful, or at least entertaining. Have a great week. I'll see you in the next one.